Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Every once in a great while, people will say, Steve, you often criticize the police. You're often critical of the police. And people say that to me as if there's something wrong with that. And the point is that quite often police do things that are wrong. And I think it's the job of anybody who sees that to point it out to others. And, especially someone who's got a platform, whether it be a blog, a vlog, or a newspaper column, or whatever. And the interesting thing is that this is not just in America. Police everywhere misbehave. And there's a reason for it, which we'll get to in a second. But Larry says, Steve, did you see this interesting story about the cops? The cops. Well, it's the cops in France. And the story is reported from England. So this, like I said, it seems to be universal. It's universal. From the BBC, French police car crashes after officer fires taser at driver. Now, it doesn't occur to you at first when you read that they're talking about an officer inside the police car firing a taser at the driver of the police car. These are police tasering each other, and the passenger has tasered the driver of a police car. A victimless crime, some might say. A police car crashed in northern France after an officer in the passenger seat fired her taser in the direction of the driver, prosecutors say. And you might say, how does this make national news? International news? Well, 6 officers were in the vehicle. Sounds like a clown car. 6 officers were in a police vehicle. When the vehicle lost control, as the driver driving it lost control, and it hit a parked car on Saturday. The police car left the scene without stopping, prosecutors said. There were no reports of injuries. And you might know that in many places, such as America, if you are involved in an accident causing damage to anything, you are generally required to stop and do certain things. So if you hit a parked car, theoretically, you should stop and notify somebody. And if you hit a car with people in it, you should stop and identify yourself. And so leaving the scene of an accident, I'm just guessing here. I'm just guessing. Now, France has got a whole different legal system than ours. And they also speak a different language. I'm just guessing that it's against the law to leave the scene of a property damage accident. However, if any viewers are intimately knowledgeable with the laws of France, can tell me that you are perfectly allowed to hit a parked car and leave, please let me know. But I suspect that's wrong even in France. Now, the police left the scene, and 3 officers, including the one who fired the taser, are in custody. So the officers have been apparently taken into custody by other officers, ironically. The incident happened while the officers were en route to town after finishing their shifts, according to local media reports. So they were getting off work. They're heading back, probably to the station house. And some rough housing takes place in the car where somebody decides to fire their taser at the driver. Now, a lawyer for the police officer who fired the taser told the news organizations that the atmosphere was good-natured because their staff who get on well. So they were having fun. It was not fired out of malice, apparently. It was fired out of goofing around in a cop car. The lawyer says they're having fun amongst themselves and act like idiots. Now, some might say, Steve, if they're on company time, should they be having fun amongst themselves and acting like idiots? I would say probably not. Probably not. But again, things might be different in France. The lawyer said his client wanted to give her colleague, the driver, a light taser, and they ended up hitting a parked car. So she's going to lightly tase him. And again, I'm not up on the use of those kinds of devices. So I don't know if you can actually set them to stun like a phaser or set them to disintegrate like in a different episode. But the idea that you can lightly tase somebody is news to me. But again, it might be possible. I don't know. A resident who witnessed the crash reported the incident to authorities. The 3 officers in custody have been summoned to appear at criminal court later on. Now, the officer who discharged the taser will be prosecuted for intentional violence with a weapon and endangering the lives of others. Her lawyer told the news organizations that she could face a prison sentence. Her two colleagues are accused of hit and run and aiding and abetting a hit and run. And now here's the kicker. Here's the kicker that brings this whole story down to earth and puts it right in the same lane with every story we've got in America or any other country we talk about police misconduct. Who's investigating it? The police. And internal investigation has been opened. So the police are investigating themselves. And I'm sure they'll get to the bottom of it. Now, here's the thing. The real issue here, though, is that you have six law enforcement officers in a police car. They're driving along, having some lighthearted fun, acting like idiots. And the phrase "like idiots" is from their attorney. So don't get mad at me. Don't say, "Hey, Steve, I hate it when you badmouth French police." Okay? Someone's going to say that. I'm quoting their attorney. They were acting like idiots. Like idiots is a quote. Okay? 6 police officers in a cop car acting like idiots, and one of them decides to lightly tase the driver. Now, again, admitting ignorance with respect to how those things work, I would assume that you generally don't mess with the driver of the car you are in. Shouldn't mess with the driver of any car, but it seems to me that some kinds of instinctive self-preservation concepts should kick in and should occur to you that, oh, by the way, I don't want to hurt the driver of the car because I'm in the car, and if I hurt the driver, bad things could happen to the car, and I'm in the car. Hence, bad things could happen to me. You'd think. But again, I don't know. Things might be different in France. The laws of physics and common sense, I think, should apply. But this gets us back to the idea that the police are investigating themselves, which means that I don't have high hopes that much will happen here. But then again, these are the police in France. I don't actually have, a dog in this fight. I don't. So I will tell you, though, that this gets us back to the saying. It goes back to Latin, it goes back to juvenile. Who will guard the guards themselves? Who indeed will guard the guards? Or who will watch the watchmen? And that is the point. That if you've got people who are supposed to enforce the law, what happens when they break the law? Who should investigate them? And the idea that the police can investigate themselves is always a problem. It's always a problem. I did a story not too long ago about a department in America that had so many complaints backed up. It's kind of like, oh yeah, we'll investigate it, but even we can't investigate it for months because there's so many complaints ahead of this one. And you really think that there needs to be some other system in place. So I know that sometimes if there's criminal allegations, it's against a local police department, the state police might investigate. Or if it's a federal agency, another agency might investigate. But when it comes to the local police, it almost seems like there should be like a civilian board or something that oversees them with respect to disciplinary issues. But the idea that the police themselves will investigate themselves, I've always thought that was a little bit self-serving and was probably not going to help us out all that much in rooting out this kind of stuff. Because, think of all the times that when you were younger and an older person actually had caught you doing something remarkably stupid. And if you haven't, just think back to an episode of Dennis the Menace. So you're sitting there and you realize that what you did was wrong. And you know that. Bad things happened. You did something wrong. And you're getting the lecture. And you know you're going to get this lecture. And the person has to give you the lecture. And they feel like they've got to do it. And you know they've got to do it. And they're giving you the lecture. Part of the lecture always is, what were you thinking when you did that? What were you thinking? And so you want to back up to the moment that these 6 people, police officers, acting like idiots in a car, driving along. What was the passenger thinking when she lightly tased the driver, causing him to hit a parked car? Okay, that's number 1. What was she thinking? Number 2, what was the driver thinking when he drove off after hitting the parked car? Somebody else had to call that in. Somebody else had to call the police. And somebody else had to call the police and go, I'd like to report a hit and run. And the car that hit and ran was a police car. Could you send out a police car? Think of the irony. A police car needs to come to the scene because one just left the scene. It's a waste of resources. This thing, it's like an onion, but a joke that every layer you get down, it gets funnier and funnier. And I mean, luckily nobody was hurt, but it's crazy. So you got 6 police officers in a car acting like idiots. One of them tases the driver. The driver hits a parked car. They flee the scene. Somebody else calls the police, who send a car out to investigate, and then you discover, oh, the car that hit the car was a police car, and it was a police person driving the car, but he hit the car because he'd been tased by another police officer acting like an idiot. But don't worry, we'll investigate it, because that's what we do. So that's actually the moral to the story, is that everywhere in the world, these things happen. And everywhere in the world, the answer is we'll investigate ourselves. And how much you want to bet nothing will happen. So there you go. But Larry sent a thanks a lot for doing that, my friend. French police car crashes after officer fires taser at driver, from the BBC. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. When we cannot bear to be alone, it means we do not properly value the only companion we'll have from birth to death, ourselves.